How good are the Noles? Well, the more important question is, how good are the Noles without Jordan Travis? Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Instant analysis on the Gators and the Noles from the swamp, where Florida State gets by Florida 24-15. Close game, and the Gators jumped out early, but Florida State came back for the much-needed win to stay undefeated. Right out of the gate with Tate Rodemaker in the game. Of course, Jordan Travis left the game against North Alabama last week. He is sidelined for the rest of the season with a severely sprained ankle. Tate Rodemaker played well against, that was North Alabama. He did not fare well in the first half, at least, against the Florida Gators, despite the Gators' awful defensive showing much of 2023. 10 yards of total offense for the Florida State offense going into the final drive of the first half. They were down 12-0. They had given up a safety as well when Derek Wingo, who notched his 12th sack in the season for the Gators, and also Princely, not going to try to navigate that last name. They racked up the safety on Tate Rodemaker to make it 12-0 game, but with only 10 yards in the first half, and that would have tied a Florida State futility record on offense for a first half. They went on a 90-yard touchdown drive to get within 12-7. Excellent back shoulder throw near the end of that drive from Rodemaker to Johnny Wilson down to the 2-yard line. Trey Benson with a touchdown. He had a bit of a off first half again. Not much movement along the offensive line, and Rodemaker not creating much in the passing game, and a pretty conservative play calling approach by Mike Norvell. Again, Trey Benson would get going at some point down the line. Interesting little spitting incident. That sounds a little nasty, and it looked nasty. It looked like he had about a half a bottle of water in his mouth, talking about Jamari Lyons, the defensive lineman for the Gators, who, again, spitting in the face of a Florida State offensive lineman, number 75. See ya. We have no place with that business on the football field. So, fortunately, he was caught and ejected, and hopefully he will grow up and learn from that. Had 14 seconds left in the first half, and again, Noles had the momentum, having cut this lead to 12-7, but Montrell Johnson ripped off a 52-yard run right in the face of that Florida State defense as the Gators were winding down the clock, headed to the locker room up by 5. 52 yards puts them in field goal range, but penalty, negative play, they miss a long field goal, so we stay at a 12-7 game going into the half. Check out these two Florida defensive linemen. Did you see them? You got Cameron Jackson, weighs in at 360 pounds. Actually elevated to bat down a ball at the line, and that caught my attention, and I looked him up and thought, my goodness, at 360. But he's a lightweight compared to Desmond Watson, who had a sack, also figured into a goal line stand at one point in the game for the Gators, weighs in at 439. Trey Benson started to get going for Florida State. As he told Holly Rowe after the game on the sideline, I knew the 2s and the 3s would become, boom, plays downfield, that I would pop 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and that started in the second half. It's fun to watch Trey Benson run. Kirk Herbstreit in particular noted his patience in setting up his blocks, waiting for his blocks, and then springing loose. 19 carries for 95 yards. Max Brown. So we had dueling backup quarterbacks here. Tate Rodemaker, and then also Graham Mertz, of course, who was having a fine season for the Florida Gators, leading the SEC in completion percentage and coming off some of his best efforts in recent weeks. Unfortunately, sidelined with a collarbone injury. Max Brown out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, 35th rated quarterback coming out of high school. And certainly Billy Napier tried to keep him under wraps, use his athleticism. He's a guy that can create plays and break, contain, and has to cause the defense to respect him downfield. Only threw 16 passes, 9 completions, 80 yards, and as long as the Gators are playing in front, they tried to limit his downfield throwing, or really any throwing, out of Max Brown. Trevor Etienne on the shelf. He had to leave the game with a right lower leg injury. So Montrell Johnson, who has been hobbling pretty much the entire season, and most notably in this game, had to take on the rushing load, and he was up to the challenge for most of the night until it became rather excruciatingly obvious that Florida had no downfield threat, and Alex Brown was not going to challenge the defense that way, and they just loaded up on the run, did the Noles. Also did not help Florida football that they were missing three key defensive players in Kelby Collins, Manny Nunnerly, and Devin Moore, who have combined for 55 tackles this year. All right, we've got at this point a 15-14 game with Florida leading, and the Florida punter outkicked the coverage a number of times. Not his fault. Kick him as far as you can. But Keon Coleman tracked the ball, caught it over his head, and then sprinted for 42 yards to put Florida State in business down by 1 point in the fourth quarter. And that led to a field goal drive, and Florida State led it 17-15. Meanwhile, more pressure put on Alex Brown to create some plays. More pressure as the clock wound down in the fourth quarter for Florida to, of course, create something in the passing game. They finally got a meaningful 20-yard shot to their leading receiver, Ricky Pearsall, in the fourth quarter. That was the first catch for Pearsall the entire game. But Patrick Payton and Jared Verse coming off the edges made life miserable on Max Brown. Jason Marshall, though, had a sack on Florida State when they had something going to continue to give life to the Florida offense and give them chances. So the Gators defense showed up in this game with their best defensive effort of the season, matching what they did to a certain extent against Tennessee. Had a scary situation about halfway through the fourth quarter where Tate Rodemaker was sliding near the first down marker. A couple Florida defenders converged, targeted him. You had a late hit and a target. The Florida players as well collided. Rodemaker came off the field. Brock Glenn, the third-string quarterback, had to take the reins for FSU for a few plays, but Tate Rodemaker, showing his toughness, comes back into the football game despite what could have been the concussion protocol. He obviously was checked out and cleared. All right, the Florida State offense finally got to the Gators defense and wore them down, and that was most notably the offensive line and Trey Benson over and over and over. I mentioned 19 carries for 95 yards, and then a closing touchdown with a couple missed tackles in the hole as Trey Benson, combination of speed, elusiveness, and power, brought it home from there, and a final touchdown to break away and secure the victory at 24-15. Florida State on to the ACC championship game. They take on a Louisville team that lost at home today. So Louisville on the periphery of the playoff discussion, still with just one loss coming into today's action, lose at home against the 6-5 Kentucky team. So Louisville, not a great football team. Certainly Jeff Brom has done an outstanding job and warrants consideration for National Coach of the Year, let alone ACC Coach of the Year. So Louisville must bring their A game. Florida State will be a substantial favorite. But again, Tate Rodemaker in place of Jordan Travis. I don't know that this looks like a playoff team, but it's not going to matter what I think, of course. And it shouldn't even matter what the College Football Playoff Committee thinks. If this team wins the ACC championship and finishes 13-0, they are a playoff team. As for Florida, it's back to the drawing board for Billy Napier. They can gain something from this effort, but they finished the season at 5-7. Don't even get the prestige of going to a bowl game, the extra money for the conference, and of course those precious 15 practices. But Billy Napier on track right now to deliver a top 5 to 10 recruiting class on National Signing Day coming up in less than 3 weeks. Your thoughts about Florida State football and those hated Gators right here at the Voice of College Football.